Good night, everyone.
Good night.
So I have 10 minutes to speak. I'm supposed to start at 7. It's 20 past. Don't worry, I'll still do the entire presentation. Tonight we are going to speak.
They're going and coming. They're going and coming.
Tonight we're going to speak about the environment. All right, and my question is, how many of you know what the word environment means? And is it only what surrounds us, or does our environment comprise of much more? So the environment, we're going to look at the environment. The environment actually is more than what surrounds us. The environment can be divided into 3 subsections. You have your external environment, which is basically and literally what surrounds us. Our internal environment, which is basically the going-ons of our insides, or homeostasis, if you want to get scientific. And your spiritual and mental environment. And if you look at the screen, you'll realize that all of them interconnect. So one can't do without the other, and if you damage one, essentially you affect another one. Now, how aware are you of your environment? And I'm speaking both external, internal, and spiritual. Life can only flourish in a suitable environment. Life requires an appropriate balance of climate, water, soil, and air. And I'm going to go a little further. Faith. Water pollution. The physical, chemical, and biotic factors that surround us, such as air, temperature, sun, soil, and water, as well as our flora and fauna, compose of our environment. And health requires sustaining and supporting our environment. And many of our practices, unfortunately, undermine both the support and the sustainability. This is one of the rivers in India. India is one of the countries that has one of the highest pollution rates. About 95% of their rivers are polluted. And unfortunately, rivers are one of their main sources for their water supply. So you can imagine people, as you can see, people are bathing in this river. There are 2 areas of pollution that are particularly concerning for us in this day and age: the water and air pollution. Because of industrialization, we have produced massive amounts of collateral waste, even in the Caribbean, because we now have more and more factories coming on scene from persons overseas. They come to our islands. This is a nice spot to build something. They put up these big buildings. You see all the black smoke coming out, and they alone know what gets dumped into our ocean. All right? The seriousness of the environment contamination by pollutants varies with the elements that are involved. One of the biggest contaminants today is plastic.
Yes, yes.
Everything we use, or almost everything we use, comes in a plastic container. How many of us buy bottled water, if not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? Average case of water is what? 24 bottles? What do you do with the bottle when you finish drinking it? You dump it. Alright? For us, we put it in our garbage bin, it goes to the landfill. Some people, you drive along the roads, they're driving, they drink the water. What do? They throw it out of the window. That goes into the environment. Okay? Now, plastics are actually derivatives of, give me a second here. Sorry. Okay, back on plastics. Plastics are derivatives of petroleum-type products, and while they're extremely useful, unfortunately, they do not degrade naturally. So don't mind all the ads that we see of biodegradable plastic. Don't worry, it's safe for the environment. This is all false. It's just a marketing scheme. All right. even when plastic is mixed with cellulose, which is what makes it biodegradable, the actual plastic particles remain much longer than the cellulose. Cellulose breaks down, so we don't have to worry about the cellulose. Cellulose degrades. The remaining plastic particles, if small enough, may be subject to bacterial degradation. However, this does not always occur. All right, and there's actually a case where California sued a plastic bottle company for the same reason of making false claims, because they quote unquote their products were biodegradable. The plastic stays in the environment. If it goes into the water, it harms the animals in the water, and for those of you who eat fish, think about what you're eating.
Wow.
Contaminated water makes you sick. Now, for those of us who live in countries such as St. Kitts that has a fairly good, safe water supply, we tend not to worry too much about contaminated water. However, when you go hiking, for example, or you're out camping, your water supply might not necessarily be the safest water. You go hiking, you come across a river, you're thirsty. Reflex, you might just put your head down and start to drink. And water like that tends to contain a particular bacteria called Giardia. If you develop giardiasis, which is the sickness, you get a very bad case of diarrhea. And in some cases, it can actually cause liver damage.
Wow.
Approximately 783 million people in the world. So we're talking a ratio of 1 in every 9 persons does not have access to clean water. Water pollution has contributed significantly to a wide range of health problems in humans. Diarrhea is actually one of the leading causes of illness and death up to this day. So it's not cancer, it's not heart disease, all right? It's not HIV or other communicable diseases. It's something as small or as common, I should say, as diarrhea. There are approximately 30,000 deaths every week from unsafe water and unhygienic living conditions. And water and hygienic conditions go hand in hand. If you don't have a proper water supply, you tend to have poor sanitation. So you can't clean your bathroom area the way it should be cleaned. You can't bathe as often as you should bathe. You can't clean your house as often as it should be cleaned. So then what happens? You get rodents, you get other types of pests. Approximately 90% of the persons who die from diarrhea, unfortunately, tend to be under the age of 5. Children and elderly persons, and if I say patients, forgive me, children and elderly persons tend to be affected more than persons in that middle range. 88% of diarrheal deaths are due to unsafe drinking water, lack of access to sanitation facilities, and inadequate availability for water or for hygiene. Now, here's something else. How many of you plant your own food? Okay, not very many, all right? How many of you go to the supermarket to buy your vegetables? Are you aware that a lot of the vegetables that we buy in the supermarket are imported from the United States? Most of these crops are what we call GM crops, genetically modified. And they do this to make them more resistant to different types of pests and diseases that can affect the plant. However, your GM crops are actually resistant to a type of fertilizer, a herbicide, called glyphosate. Because they're resistant to glyphosate, when they spray the plants with glyphosate, they then use higher concentrations of this herbicide than is actually recommended. What happens? This glyphosate then leaches into your soil, and if it goes into the soil, it's going to end up in your water. Now, when this gets into the water, it can actually cause issues in your reproductive system, hence infertility. It can also cause kidney failure. And outbreaks of disease tend to be related to viral and bacterial contamination by both human and animal waste. In our water, we go back to the previous picture. Now they're bathing in this water, we don't know what else they're doing in this water. And then somebody else is going to come along and take this water and maybe drink it. They're gonna get sick. So hygiene is actually a fundamental health principle and practice. Now, if you live in an area where you're not sure that your water is safe, what do? Boil your water. All right? 5 minutes, please, no more than 5 minutes. Now, sun, wind, and wave action, and we're still talking about a bit about plastic here before I go on to air pollution, can fragment your plastic. However, most of it finds its way into the ocean, like I said, and scientists have actually found plastic matter, the particulate matter at depths of 15 to 30 feet in the Pacific Ocean. And this actually affects our plant life. It kills krill, which is the ocean's basic food source. This is what fish eat, all right, and we in turn now go and eat the fish. The toxic dioxin compounds, mercury for example, and cadmium tend to be dumped. These are heavy metals and these are dumped by industries into our water supply. Think about what happened in 1986 in Ukraine, the Chernobyl episode,
disaster,
where that radioactive plant exploded. You didn't see the short-term effects. There wasn't much, people died, yes, but you didn't see much happening in the immediate aftermath of what happened. However, 20 years down the line, people were being born deformed, and you had this high incidence of cancer. So it leaches into your soil and you think, well, after a while it's going to go away. That doesn't happen, all right? You have long-term effects, and the radioactive isotopes, when they leak into our soil and enter our water table, they become silent killers because the effect is long-term and it is almost always lethal. Now, one single vehicle will emit what can be considered a very insignificant amount of pollutants into the atmosphere. And that would be fine if there was only one car in the whole world.
Wow.
However, as our population becomes larger, the number of automobiles rockets. And even in St. Kitts, almost every household in St. Kitts has at least 2 vehicles. And if they have young people in that household, as soon as they start working, they want to buy a car. Now imagine every single person in that household owning a vehicle and using that vehicle on our little island. Imagine all of that stuff going into the atmosphere, into an ozone that is already damaged. We rely on fossil fuels to help us with energy, and much of the energy that we use comes from our fossil fuels. However, they're now finding that our fossil fuels are on the decline. So people are now starting to look for alternate energy sources. However, regardless of the cost issue, we have to learn to conserve. So instead of all 4 people who are going in the same direction to work, driving 4 different vehicles, we could use 1 car. Or better yet, let somebody walk. There are actually towns in various parts of the world that have very, very short life expectancies. The average life expectancy in St. Kitts, I think, is about 75 years, all right, which isn't too bad. In places like Japan and China, it's a bit high, it's 80-something. However, in places like India and in certain countries in Africa, their life expectancy actually reaches rates of medieval times. So we're talking people are dying at the age of 30, and it's the norm that a person dies before they reach the age of 40. It's also the norm in a lot of these countries, or in parts of these countries, that you be born with a defect. So You might be born with your limbs too short, you might be born with your face deformed, you might be born with heart issues. And for them, it's normal. And this all is because of pollution, both to our water supply, to the air. We damage our ozone. In America, North America, it's estimated that approximately half of the population is affected by some form of dangerous pollution level. Way back when, for those of you who can remember, lead used to be placed in our gasoline and lead was placed in paint. So you had very high incidences of lead poisoning, and physicians actually knew what to look for to determine if somebody had suffered from lead poisoning. All right, the gums changed color, for example, they might have turned blue, your behavior, you started behaving strange. Our paint is now lead-free, our gas is supposed to be lead-free, all right? However, we're still throwing out stuff into the air and still damaging our lungs. The American Lung Association estimates that roughly 50% of Americans live in counties that have unhealthy levels of either ozone or pesticide pollution. The University of South California has studied residents in 12 communities within a 200-mile radius of Los Angeles, and they found 3 groups of children within these communities who have shown interference with lung growth in those who live in the more polluted atmospheric conditions. And such children are at risk for developing both bronchial and pulmonary disease. Even in sane kids, asthma is becoming much more prevalent in our young population. Now, what are the causes of asthma? I don't know what happened here with my slide. So, causes of asthma. I don't know what happened here, sorry. Pollution. Pollution in the air, you breathe in the bad stuff, it actually does affect your lung over a long-term period. Pets, for those of you who have pets in your house, dogs belong outside, cats belong outside.
Yes.
In the bed.
Yes.
They have no reason to be in your house on your bed.
Yes.
Or in your chair for that matter.
Preach it.
Alright.
Preach it.
You might be fine having the pet there, but somebody else might come and the pet fur is actually an irritant to the respiratory system. So then that person starts coughing, that person starts sneezing, and in some cases that person's airway can actually start closing up. Dust, clean your house.
Yes.
Mold. Food, certain types of food do trigger asthma. Chemicals, once again, we're polluting the environment. Certain types of infections, and of course there's always that genetic disposition. In other words, your father had it, your mother had it, your grandmother had it. There's a 90% chance you will develop it, but you can prevent it. So let's take a little second and take a quick look at why asthma makes it so hard for that person to breathe. Your air enters your respiratory system, both through your mouth and through your nose, and goes down to the bronchial tubes, which are these little things here. All right, so you have 2 main bronchi, and then those branch off into what we call bronchioles. In the asthmatic person, their bronchi look like this. This is a normal one. So you see how nice and open and clean it is? In your asthmatic person, the muscles contract or constrict, they tighten, and the muscle wall gets very, very thick. And your air passage becomes inflamed and you secrete excess mucus. So the problem with an asthmatic patient is not getting the air in. They get it in quite fine. The problem is getting that air back out. Yes. All right, so in a non-asthmatic person, breathing is not a problem. Now let's look at the sun. We live on an island. We technically are supposed to have 365 days of sunshine. How many of you think that the sun is good? How many of you think that the sun is bad? All right. So it's a bit of both. All right. The sun, while being central to the provision of energy to our planet, Much of its radiation is important to our well-being. However, overexposure to ultraviolet radiation, which comes from the sun, can be harmful. And such radiation is stronger in areas where the ozone layer has been damaged. Back to pollution. You emit stuff from your vehicles, or you burn trash unnecessarily, you're sending all that smoke up, you're damaging the ozone. And for every crack that you put into the ozone, that's a space where those rays are gonna come down. Alright? Now, sunshine maintains your ambient temperature, helps keep the temperature of the earth normal. It promotes photosynthesis, which is the process by which plants breathe. And plants breathe, they give us oxygen. They take in the carbon dioxide. Alright? So that's something good. Now, sunlight also powers the recycling of water through evaporation. Through the evaporation of, and my slides keep going all over the place. Through evaporation of water into the clouds, and of course, when your clouds become condensed enough, you get rain. Okay? So, sun can be both good and bad. The amount of sunshine that you absorb is very much dependent on the color of your skin.
Alright.
So, your melanin, alright? People of color, or people who have dark skin, burn less easily than Caucasians, or people who are paler, because your Asians also burn, but not as easily as your white people, for example. Alright? Now, while we think, yeah, we have melanin, we have a lot of melanin, we can stand in the sun for very long, black people can develop skin cancer. And when we develop skin cancer, unfortunately, it's much, much more aggressive than if a Caucasian develops skin cancer. So the length of time that you stay in the sun, you should still be conscious of it. And if you're going to the beach, for example, please use sunblock. Not because you're dark skinned, please still use the sunblock. The sunblock protects your skin from the ultraviolet rays. Now, why is sunlight so important then for us? Sunlight actually helps with the synthesis of vitamin D, which is an essential nutrient for our body. It converts the inactive form of vitamin D, which is called polycalciferol, into the active form of vitamin D that we need for most of our body functions. And while some of us actually live in the nice climate, we live in the Caribbean, so we're certain that we get enough sunshine, or at least most of us get enough sunshine. There are persons who live in parts of the world who have 6 months of darkness and 6 months of sun. In Alaska, for example, all right? And these persons can actually suffer from what is known as SAD, seasonal affective disorder. Studies have actually shown that if these persons are exposed to sunlight, their mood brightens. When they're placed in dark areas for very prolonged periods of time, they become depressed, they can actually develop suicidal thoughts, their productivity actually decreases. So this is something that you need to take into consideration, even for those of us that live on the sunny island and still don't like to go out in the sun. A few minutes of sunshine every day is good. And preferably, like Majesta said, the morning sun.
Yes.
Alright, before you get that concentration of UV rays. I see Sylvester standing there, I don't know if that means my time soon now. Now, dermatologists, like I said, have noted the association between sunburn and skin cancer, and hence advocate the avoidance of overexposure of sunshine. And once again, the amount of sun you need simply depends on where you live, and more importantly, the color of your skin. Now, here's something else that's interesting. Back to our seasonal affective disorder. Sunlight actually stimulates the production of serotonin. Serotonin is a hormone, to use that word. It's a substance that's produced in our body that affects our mood. When you have sufficient levels of serotonin, you're happy, you're comfortable, you know, and you go about your daily movement without much preoccupation. Right? Let's look quickly at noise pollution. And this is something that's happening more and more in St. Kitts. You're driving in your vehicle, a vehicle passes you and you think you were just in an earthquake. Because they have their music up so loud, it causes your vehicle to shake.
Yes.
Carnival. I've seen persons have little babies in the midst of the woodum, 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 woodum. And you're thinking that poor child's ear. Now, how does noise affect us? It can actually make you deaf because we do have a threshold with sound. Anything, now noise is considered anything that is unpleasant. Any sound that is unpleasant and actually produces some degree of pain or discomfort. So it can make you deaf, causes lack of sleep, can make you irritable. Yes, it can actually cause indigestion, heartburn, can cause high blood pressure because you start stressing about how loud your neighbor has on his music. We don't want to go over there to say anything, so you're in your house grumbling. What's going to happen? Your blood pressure is going to go up. It can cause ulcers, and it can even cause you to develop heart disease and make you paranoid. How does sound affect children? Now, breathing. Hearing threshold, 0 to 10 decibels, all right? And that's a measurement that's used for sound. Now let's look at what happens as you go higher. The sound that a factory or a train makes at 15 miles per hour approximately. 80 decibels, possible hearing damage. A toy cap pistol, those little guns that children play with but should not, or a firecracker. And this is what can happen, eardrum rupture. And if your eardrum ruptures, there's that risk of you becoming deaf. Our internal environment. Now, our internal environment, as I said before, is essentially the conditions that prevail on the inside of our bodies. And why is it important that we take care of our internal environment? For the simple reason, what happens on the outside affects what happens on the inside. Now, if I'm breathing in smoke or smog, or I live in an area that's highly polluted, or I'm smoking or I'm drinking, I'm affecting my organs, and then I'm making myself sick, or I'm putting myself at risk for developing certain illnesses. We should be very, very conscious of not introducing toxins and other dangerous substances into our bodies, our internal environment. Even actions, certain things that we do. Promiscuity, for example, puts you at risk. Tobacco smoke with all its chemicals is a classic example of what bad things do to our bodies. Alcohol is a potent toxin. The use of psychotropic drugs, medication which give you a high or change your behavior or perception, which are known. Things that we call recreational substances. They damage our internal environment as well. A lot of substances that people use have never been tested and they've not been properly evaluated. And yet sometimes they're purported to be good for you. We should be, and as Dr. Carter presented last night, the one that says wine is good for you. As she said, if you want the reserve the word I can call, grapes. Eat your grapes, eat your peanuts.
Yes.
All right? You don't have to drink the alcohol because while it does contain that substance, it contains toxins that can damage your body.
True.
Wow. Cigarette smoke. Now, I've heard people say, I don't inhale. You don't inhale, but the persons around you have to inhale what you just put out. So, if you're conscious that you're not inhaling so as not to damage your insides, think about the persons who are around you because you're damaging them. We are more than mere physical beings, and this is something I want everybody to take home. We possess intellectual, emotional, and spiritual dimensions, and we need to consider our emotional and spiritual environment as well. Mr. Sylvester, I'm almost done. Now, think about how we live. Think about our homes, our workplaces. More often than not, lots of homes have high levels of tension. Sometimes it's a single parent home. That mother has 3, 5 children, works 2 jobs. She comes home and she's frustrated because there's not enough money to buy food. And she doesn't know how to deal with the situation. So she yells at the children or she beats them and then they disrespect her. And it's a vicious cycle. You have homes where there's domestic violence and these are persons who are afraid to talk outside of the home. Anger and violence in the home take an enormous toll on our health. And I said anger in the home, but anger in the workplace as well. Not being treated respectfully by your boss or by your supervisor, it affects you, all right? Stress can actually cause ulcers, stress can cause hypertension, stress can cause heart disease. And stress, believe it or not, increases your risk for diabetes. Wow. This is something that I found and I really liked. They're both texts, one from 1 Kings and one from 1 Samuel. 1 Kings says that the spiritual atmosphere or environment can make a good man bad. And 1 Samuel says the spiritual atmosphere or environment can make a bad man good. Your environment actually does affect you. The way a child is brought up in the home is often easily read outside of the house. How does that child behave in school? How does that child behave when his or her parents are not around? Is that child respectful? When you look at the young men who end up in gangs, a lot of times we tend to just automatically throw the blame on one person, but it's the community. It takes a community to raise a child, and we always need to remember that. So the community becomes the home, and that environment, that encouraging environment is what creates that better person. That encouraging environment is what keeps that child out of harm's way. How then can we maintain good mental health? Practice good lifestyle habits. Exercise, sleep, all right, which is something that we'll be speaking about during these seminars.
Don't oversleep.
Eat properly. Don't oversleep, don't undersleep. Proper eating. Maintain your social circle. It's always good to have that one person that you can count on. It could be your spouse, it could be your parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a very close friend, it could be your pastor. But you should always have at least one person when you feel down, you can call that person and talk to that person. Get what's bottled up inside out. Reduce your stress level. Have a good relationship with your colleagues at work.
Yes.
Pray. Amen. Keep a good relationship with your husband or your wife.
Amen.
Maintain a positive work environment.
Yes.
If you come to work and things don't go the way that you want them to go, pray about it. It might go better tomorrow.
Yes.
If you have an issue, rather than hold it inside, go and speak with your boss. Look, this happened and I really don't like the way it was handled. If possible, could we the next time, if it's an issue with me, I'd prefer if you pull me aside rather than embarrass me in front of my colleagues.
Good point.
All of this affects the way you work, and believe it or not, it affects your productivity. Now how then can we maintain? So we've spoken about maintaining a healthy mental environment. How can we protect our environment? Use reusable containers to store water. If you take water to work, buy a glass container. Put your water in it, refill that container. You take it back home, you bring it back to work. Rather than every time you go, you drop a bottle of water in your bag, when you finish, you toss that bottle.
Well,
carpool, like I said. And if you can't carpool, walk. Rather than driving your car from down in Port Zante up to Sands Complex, for example, where you have a visit to the radiologist, or you have to go electricity department to pay a bill. Park your car and walk.
Yes.
You're helping your environment. Avoid noisy environments as much as possible. And don't be afraid if your neighbor's playing the music too loud.
Police.
Before we call the police, let's go and ask them if they could turn it down a notch or two.
They don't do that.
Avoid using tobacco, alcohol, and illicit drugs. At the end of the day, they do you no good. And finally, and most importantly, pray as a family. Prayer, believe it or not, helps with a lot of things. And when you pray, when you take it to God in prayer, and I can attest to this, when you take your problems to God, the relief that you feel when you finish praying,
Oh, yes, yes.
you already know that they've been answered. Remember, He might not always tell us yes, but there's always a reason to the answer that He gives us.
Amen.
Thank you.
Well done.